Well, welcome everyone to the International Foundation for Robotics research on robots and COVID. I'm Robin Murphy, and today we've got a great panel to talk about robots and COVID. And it's not like they can get COVID, but and what is the impact on society? So the panel today, to give a little background, think about the impact that we've had in the past year. As of last night, we've had over 94 million cases worldwide of coronavirus with over 2 million deaths. And it's been everywhere. Every place in the world has been impacted by the coronavirus. But of course, as we've known for the past year, this is more than a health crisis. It's going to ruin economic development for so many countries. Poverty is likely to increase, and the impact just as an economic, think about the impact on future generations. Think of how many students have been out of school, what that disrupts their educational environments, their expectations for the future. And so as we look at this terrible societal tragedy, the question is, where are the robots? And that, of course, is a big question. Where are the robots when we need them most? Well, the answer is they're all over the place. Looking at this, at least in 45 countries, we've seen robots in actual operational use explicitly to cope with COVID-19 or its effects. And that's what our panel here today is, to talk about these robots, how they've been used successfully, and what are the lessons to be learned for the robotics community. We have a lovely set of speakers today. I'm Dr. Robin Murphy at Texas A&M, and I specialize in disaster robots, but I am so delighted to have Dr. Paolo Dario from Italy, who, a founder, a pioneer in the field of biorobotics. And he's going to be talking about the extraordinary work that's been done in Italy. That's really a template for the rest of us. Dr. Lino Marques from Portugal has been such a leader in the safety, security, rescue robotics community. And he's the editor of a forthcoming special issue of Robotics and Automation magazine on COVID. And then Kai Zhang, Worcester WPI, he is an up-and-coming researcher in medical robotics, and his devices are just absolutely fascinating. We'll have these presentations, short presentations, and then we'll have questions by our front row discussants. We have Dr. Roland Swigert, Dr. Antonio Frizzoli, Risuke Tsumura, Elias Spencer, Vinesh Ganduti, and Filippo Cavallo. So they'll be asking questions, and of course you as the audience will be able to ask questions through Slido as long as we've got time for it. So let's get started and see robots and COVID. Dr. Dario, please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Robin, and thanks all colleagues and attendees. What I'm going to share with you today is I would say a story that is a real story about the reaction of the Italian robotics community to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'd like to start by pointing out how things happen. Actually, Italy was the first Western country severely affected by COVID-19. And the point is that this came to a total surprise. In January and February, we heard about COVID-19 in China, but it looked like a very remote problem. But all of a sudden, we found COVID in the middle of northern Italy, actually, very close to Milan. And this was a real, I would say, shock for all the country. And we had a number of very, very emotionally moving effect, especially the elderly, but not only the elderly were severely affected. And we had a total lockdown. I think we were among the first countries, probably the first in Europe, that had this total lockdown. So you see our cities totally desert and ceremonies with no participants and many doctors and healthcare workers infected. At the time, there were no clear idea what the COVID-19 was and how to take care of it. But fortunately, robotics had stored what we can call some food for the winter. Together with colleagues, like in fact Robin, who is with us, we wrote an editorial very quickly. It was published on March 28, but of course it was written in February. About combating COVID-19. So how robotics could contribute to manage public health and infectious diseases. And this was a first effort to put together the robotics community with an organized reaction. And then at the same time, the Italian robotics community reacted quickly in a coordinated manner. Just a few months ago, in fact, we had created IRIM, that is the Italian Institute of Robotics and Intelligent Machines. The president is Antonio Bicchi, and most distinguished researchers in robotics are part of it. So what we did was to prepare and submit a paper, a communication, also to Science Robotics, and then to submit another paper that is now under evaluation to the IEEE RAM. And the idea was to describe what we call the citizen robotics approach from the Italian community, but also the idea of an inclusive approach that is really collaborating. And what I like to point out that this quick reaction was possible because of what I call food for the winter. That is a network of facilities. We were able in previous years not only to educate a great team of roboticists and the AI specialists and students, but also facilities, test sites, spin-off companies, collaboration with public healthcare organizations, good relation with funding agencies, collaboration with doctors and clinical experts, also legal experts, real hospitals and elderly care facilities. For example, we are hosting the European Center of Excellence on the regulation of robotics and AI. And this is very, very important for the legal aspect of our effort. Of course, robots are about physical bodies. So is not only to use data, but to use force and motion. And so providing and intervening in different ways using the physical support that is needed. And together with IRIM, what we did is to schedule a series of events, and more are scheduled, if you see, but essentially listening to needs, providing short-term responses, and also organizing pilot projects very, very regularly. And you see here, for example, the questionnaires that we developed in order to understand the needs and expectations of different categories of person, and then how the perception and feelings during the lockdown looked like, and then to develop ideas, suggestions, and working activities. There were interviews, so really an inclusive and very, let's say, detailed analysis of the problem. We started by analyzing a pilot project in the world, and this is a collection of different projects divided by geographical areas, application field, the kind of TRL, the technology readiness level of each of the device that was developed, and then a number of short-term responses. So essentially, I have a need, and people could join. I have a solution and people could join. I can build and realize and people could join. And here is a list of the projects that were collected during these activities. And then briefly, some examples of what we have done, essentially in those areas: healthcare, assistive needs, agriculture, something in logistics. And here, by the way, are Filippo Cavallo, Antonio Frisoli, who have been leaders in the development of some of these solutions, especially for sanitization, but also for services. A very interesting point here is the case of a Chinese robot. We had Chinese students, actually we are educating, like all of us, students from China. Most of them went back to China when the pandemics exploded, but they did not forget about their alma mater, said about us. And so they offered assistance in different ways. And actually a real robot for disinfection was donated by a company to us and was used. And here you see the of course, I don't have time to discuss in detail, but essentially what has been done is to put at work active project and also to launch a new project in different ways, essentially assisting who were the most needing, that essentially were elderly people, most of them suffering and some of them dying in the hospital without being able to contact their families. So dying alone, and how to help the healthcare workers and to create a link with families was very important, but also other things about assistance at home. So for example, rehabilitation devices. I have an example here of a device that we developed years ago about keeping infants at high risk for cerebral palsy under control with telerehabilitation. So all these devices were left at the families with children at risk and monitored. That is, in fact, the explosion, if you will, of telemedicine. And to conclude, many applications about agriculture. Agriculture was a key issue. During the lockdown, there were no workers harvesting fruit. So a lot of fruit was left on trees to essentially degenerate, let's say, and not harvested. And robots could be very effectively used for that. So this is my final slide. And the point is, pandemics, sometimes we can call not only black swan, but maybe a white or gray swan. Actually, we know that pandemics could come. They are a mega trend. Superbugs are with us, and the viruses will come again. So we must be prepared. Now, science and pharma have proved to be extremely effective and also quick. The vaccines, the new drugs like monoclonal antibodies. Robotics is here, and we should be ready for the next pandemics or to alleviate the consequences of the pandemics, as Robin pointed out, for example, in economics. So we learn and we must really understand the lessons and to prepare for future threats. Robot can definitely help in healthcare, can definitely help in assistance to frail people. Just to mention a case about healthcare, you know that during the lockdown, some diagnostic operation, like, for example, colonoscopy and minimal invasive surgery, were interrupted in the hospital because there was a threat about air or gases that were injected in the belly of the patient, let's say. And so the authorities decided to stop this kind of ordinary diagnostic task. So, you know, this can really have an impact. You consider dentistry and other things. Assistance to frail people, elderly and disabled in the residences, but at home. Logistics, that is a revolution. And also the ability to substitute or assist humans in primary needs, such as food production during lockdown situations. But of course, there is a lot of work that we have to do because performance are not always acceptable. Dependability is good, but not total. Acceptability by users, the integration with existing facilities, cost factors, and then the ubiquitous importance of jobs. You know, are we creating jobs? This is our idea, or in any case, satisfying clearly social needs. Thank you. I finished with my presentation.
Why, thank you, Paulo. What a lovely and what a great humanistic framing of the work of robotics. So from our front row discussions, do we have any questions?
It's a nice presentation. I wanted to know how much interaction you had with healthcare workers and policymakers who, you know, probably around February and March were thinking about any possible solution that could help. And I'm sure you're getting phone calls. So I'm curious how the interaction of, you know, healthcare workers and roboticists, how that might have gone.
Totally right. Actually, this is exactly what happened. There was a flow of requests, and I would say we were able to manage these in a very realistic manner. You know, of course, we were very concerned about the quality of the services that we could really provide. So no illusion, no science fiction, no dream promises. Actually, the network, as I said, this is what Robin pointed out, in fact. We, in Europe in general, but I would say in Italy in particular, have a very, very dense framework of relations. So we are used to work with doctors in this particular case, but also with elderly people, with association, with administrations. And we were able quite quickly to find the funds for delivering solutions that were, as we say, at high TRL. So almost ready to use. And Filippo and Antonio, who are there, were among those who benefited of funding that foundations were able to quickly raise and deliver. And so in a few months, we were able to deliver this with the trust. You know, we created trust, very important. Trust with the users. So the users believed in the not only the quality, but also in the, I would say, responsibility that we felt. And this was very good to deliver a real solution. But this is a very good point, actually. This is why I say we should prepare for the next, that we hope will never come, but we, you know, should prepare.
Well, thank you. And let's get one more question. Let's get from Vignesh, please.
Dr. Dario, my question is from an end user point of view. Should we invest more on general purpose robots that can be rapidly prototyped or re-engineered to suit certain use cases, or more on niche technologies like mouth swabbing robots? Because what will be the viability of these like robots like mouth swabbing robots post-pandemic in long term? Because as they lack the touch of human empathy. So
yeah, actually, thank you. This is also a very well posed question. I must say that we our experience is that in these circumstances, people, I would say, overcome quickly some preconcept about robotics. I think that many people were able and willing to accept high-tech solutions given the circumstances. However, I think that the best way to go, in my opinion, would be to have and to make our research to continue to proceed, and then to leave some space, because we don't know what is going to happen. We learned a lot, and again, this is for all of us. Let's not forget what is happening. Okay? This is a lesson that we must analyze and continue. So what will be the primary needs? Okay? So for example, I will say this later, but two things. Assistance in healthcare system will remain. So telemedicine will remain. For months, people didn't want, actually years, people say, well, you need a visit, you come to the doctor office, okay? No more, now people are very, very positive about doing things remotely. So it's like, of course, education, let's say. And the second is logistics, so logistics is revolutionized. But then I believe what we should do is to keep our systems close to application, and then when a new threat will come, be able to quickly invest the remaining TRL to the specific need. That is exactly what we did.
That certainly resonates with me. I'm going to hold the questions. You got generating a lot of questions, good questions, so that we can get to the other speakers. And then we'll don't worry, those of you asking questions, we'll get back to you. All right. Next up is Lena Marquez. Lena.
Sorry, I was mute. Thank you, Robin. Okay, and thank you everybody for attending this colloquium. My presentation will be about a special issue that we organized in IEEE Robotics and Automation magazine. So I will provide an overview of the papers in that special issue, which somehow cover several or I would say most of the relevant aspects related with robotics and this COVID crisis. So this slide is a bit newer than the one Robin have shown, because this is 1 hour or so old, but contains the same information. So we were synchronized. Right now we have more than 2 million deaths and more than 95 million confirmed cases. So it's not necessary to say every one of us know how serious the situation. And the question is, what can we do as roboticists to address this problem, these pandemics? So we can say that robotics and automation technologies are already in use in several critical technologies and several critical equipment which are being used either for life support of persons, intubated persons, so mechanical assisted ventilation persons, also in lab automation equipment. So behind behind the walls, I would say that robotics and automation equipment is already widely used. But robots, using robots to address these pandemics seems particularly interesting and also challenging at the same time, because we can think on robots to replace humans, to support remote operation in risky environments and to support risky tasks. We have seen also the use of robots to monitor people and alert about proximity, so to keep social distancing and so on. In terms of robotics for healthcare support, we have seen a lot of works worldwide trying to use and using robots for disinfection of risky environments, either with UV lights or with hydrogen peroxide. So we have seen some works using robots for detecting of diseases, for monitoring social distancing, providing remote healthcare, promoting social interaction with confined patients, and supporting remote work and delivering medical supplies in hospitals and also in cities to deliver goods for confined persons. So we have seen a lot of robotics happening worldwide, somehow addressing on this way or another way this crisis. But the application of robots on this crisis faces so many challenges that, okay, we have seen so many attempts, but those attempts are still quite limited in terms of impact. Because this is a really challenging problem, because deploying robots for this situation, it's challenging in so many ways. Usually robots need to interact with people. This raises safety issues, reliability concerns. There are also ethical issues related with the use of robots in these healthcare environments, that there are so many things that need to be considered that, in my opinion, this crisis somehow was it's a good challenge for people to think about robotics, where we are and where we can be in the near future. Okay, but going on. So the Special Interest Group on Humanitarian Technologies from the Robotics and Automation Society organized in past May a special issue about the use of robotics for this COVID-19 outbreak. The announcement was made in May and submissions were open until middle August. We received 37 submissions. Of those, we choose 9 papers. 3 are essentially surveys, 3 are about logistics and disinfection. 1 is about the work of using robots for telepresence, and 2 other papers are about tools to support these pandemics. So I will go through these papers and I will present what they contain. So this special issue was edited by myself, by Robin, by Kaspar Altöfer, by Satoshi Tadokoro, and by Cecilia Lassi. The first of the 3 surveys we have is a paper co-authored by Robin, and this paper somehow provides a broad overview about the works, about the tasks which are relevant in order to address these pandemics, such as using robots for prevention of the pandemics, for instance, in disinfection tasks, and what are the challenges which those robots face, such as mobility, control aspects, depending on robots, okay, human-robot interaction in the sense of using the robot, because usually those robots, when they are in operation, there should be no persons nearby, but there are challenges in terms of how to make the robots user-friendly. We can also consider the screening aspects. We can see here the Boston Dynamics robot, which is used for screening people in terms of temperature and other life indicators in order to estimate if a given person or persons in an area may or not be infected. There are also some works addressing the use of robots for life support and for testing. Also robots for treatment and for home care. We have also a paper about Digital Innovation Hub, which is a huge project, a type of projects in the European Union. This Innovation Hub, in the beginning of the pandemics, provided a call for applications. And they received 146 applications from where they selected 10 projects and provided 1 million euros funding. These projects always involved companies and were addressing high TRL levels. We can see here some of the, actually a picture of each of the robots which were used in those projects. We have projects from diagnosis, rehabilitation, robot supporting patients, and so on. Another paper was about the use of robots in laboratories. So this paper provides a survey about the different areas and analyzed the requirements and the challenges which using robots in different aspects inside laboratories and aspects related with using robots for lab support phase. Then we have a paper about the use of an autonomous logistics robot, which was used in 3 cities in China. And we have here a picture of this robot. So the paper contains details about the design and implementation and testing of this robot. We have a paper from Tizani and colleagues about the use of UVC robots. So this paper was not only about building a UVC robot, but also about designing a path planning algorithm which aims to optimize the disinfection task. Then we have a paper about the use of a commercial robot, in this case a Tiago robot, in a Roman hospital. This robot was is shown to be used in 2 different case scenarios, as a disinfection robot or as a logistic robot. And the paper provides the experience of 2 months of experience of using this robot in the hospital. We have a paper about telepresence robots. So as you know, confined persons it's hard to communicate with them and to establish a communication link with the families and so on. So this paper describes the experience from held in a hospital in Chile, in Santiago de Chile, building a telepresence robot to support the remote connection with confined and so with patients in bed. And the last two papers are about tools to support these pandemics. One is about the use of robotic arm to make autonomous swab testings. And the last one is about designing a ventilator, a mechanical ventilator. So this reports the experience held in Vanderbilt University about quickly building a ventilator. So this is a very broad overview about the papers contained in that special issue. As a final comment, I would say that the international robotics community has engaged to respond to the emergency in a very short time, creating opportunities to use robots for the benefit of our healthcare system and wider society. Another aspect of this involvement is that we are seeing also new business models developing to create new products which so far were not seen as it is visible right now. There are several barriers, of course, with the use of these technologies for healthcare support and along the public in general. So and this is what I have from my side. Sorry for the time spent.
Oh no, this was great. What a great overview. Lino, can you tell us when the special issue should appear in print?
Yeah, sorry, it will appear next March. So skip that. But publication is scheduled for next March. So it's for the first number of this year.
Just a little bit more than a month away. Well, wonderful. Yeah. Well, okay. Kai, let's go and look at a specific case of how you used your robots. Please take it away. And thank you, Lena.
Thank you.
And Kai, you'll need to unmute yourself as well.
Yes, thank you, Robin, for introduction. And hello, everyone. My name is Haitong Zhang, also known as Kai. I'm an assistant professor from Ustü Polytechnic Institute, also known as a WPI, from the United States. Thank you, Doctors Dario and Marcus, for providing fantastic overview of ongoing robotic research to tackle this COVID-19 situation. And it's my pleasure to introduce one specific case study about more like a futuristic, robotic development. I can see a lot of robotics that we have established or actually contributing to tackle the situation. I think our contribution, borrowing the word of Dr. Dario, is going to be preparation for the future, as well as how we can identify and developing a new technology to resolving unmet need during this situation. And particularly the case is to focusing on lung ultrasound procedure, which is one of the diagnostic imaging solution for treating COVID-19 patients. Before jumping to the topic, I would like to briefly introduce our research. Our group, Medical Fusion Lab, is focusing on the integration of medical imaging, especially ultrasound imaging, and photoacoustic imaging is one of the emerging ultrasound imaging solution, and its combination with medical robotics for the application including image-guided intervention for surgical or diagnostic application, as well as we also tackle how to use robotics to make imaging more intelligent, or making, for example, ultrasound to be more user-independent or intuitive. And that sparks us when we first read an article actually from Italy group where they experienced this situation, one of the earliest in a Western country, and published a work about the need of establish the standardized lung ultrasound procedure. And when I read this article and realize that there's might be the need to have a robotic platform to be more user independent and to address some of the concern existing on that procedure. And once we talked to this idea to my colleague, and very grateful to have an international, very strong collaboration within United States and even outside United States with country and institution from Nigeria. And I'd also like to give a special credit to Dr. Ryosuke Tamura. He's a postdoctoral fellow in our group. Currently in Japan, actually built this robot in Japan, his living room, and it's very astonishing work during this situation. And I also like to acknowledge the funding source from NIH to enable this research. So let me start from, first of all, why we need to have such robotic system, and like to really go down to the background, like what's the COVID-19? And I don't think I need to reiterate, how severe the impact we have received from the COVID-19. And we all know that detection of COVID-19 is very important. Having PCR tests or other type of antibody test is going to be important to, at the first place, like know if the patient have a COVID-19 or not. That is going to be a binary evaluation of COVID-19, will tell if we have a positive or negative. But what those tests doesn't provide is actually how severe the patient is infected by the virus, how the infection is suffered the lung of the patient. That would decide if doctor should send the patient to ICU right away, or if they should send a patient to isolated room or ask them to quarantine at their home. Those logistics is very important to determine the appropriate treatment plan for the patient, as well as triaging the patient, especially when the case is increasing, to maximize the hospital functionality. So this is why we not only need to have a PCR test or those tests to know if the patient has a COVID positive or negative, but also we need to know how severe the patient is. That's where diagnostic testing will play the role, and especially imaging are center for those purposes. And mainstay diagnostic imaging modality, including X-ray or CT, and ultrasound is also one of them. But those imaging devices are very, being used worldwide to diagnose the COVID-19 patients. And while CT is considered as a gold standard with its high sensitive and high resolution image quality, and be able to visualize how severe the infection is happening, there are severe actual limitations to prevent the CT to be used at any hospital or worldwide population across the globe. 3 limitations that we are aware, including the risk of transmission of CT. First of all, when patient go to hospital, the first responder is going to be emergency division, while CT mostly is sitting in a radiology department. But what it means is we need to transport the patient from one department to another department. That is, the risk of the transmission, and also the sterilization. If we scan one patient with a CT system, it takes 30 to 2 hours for one patient to clean the CT machine for every single scan, which increasing a lot of the cost and also time, resources to even having the CT scan. So there's a limited accessibility currently to reach those imaging solutions, especially for resource limited environment, including developing country. The CT is not considered as a cost-effective solution, which hinder their access to diagnose the imaging solution. And a powerful alternative to CT or X-ray actually is lung ultrasound. Lung ultrasound relatively is an emerging technology for diagnose pneumonia, but it's known to have very high sensitivity on pneumonia, actually higher than the X-ray system. And other benefit, including it's very low cost. The portable point of care ultrasound system nowadays can be lower than $10,000 US. And it's more safe because no radiation, it's portable. So it has potential to be much more accessible compared to other existing diagnostic imaging solution. And here's some example demonstration how lung ultrasound work. And the procedural lung ultrasound will require scanning the patient from there are different protocol, but one protocol, for example, using 10 region scanning. What this means is they want to scan 2 regions for one side of the chest, from the top and from the side, and 1 region from the back, which is prone position. And we do the other side of the chest as well. So in total, we have 10 regions to scan, and doctor will look at the images from each of the region and giving the score and determine the diagnostic outcome from those information. And several example of the COVID-19 sign in lung ultrasound with actual patient, including very obvious patchy B-line, as well as pleural thickening and consolidation. These signs are very typical sign on pneumonia, especially in COVID-19. We know that those are very severe appearance that doctor can differentiate from other patients. Then what's the problem, of lung ultrasound? It's already well established, and why we need to have a robotic system. And we realized through the communication with a clinician working at emergency division, through the conversation, we identify, there are several challenges. One is, as we mentioned earlier, compared to X-ray or CT, lung ultrasound is highly user dependent because it's 100% manually performed. So how well they can read the image is depending on how well they can scan the image. Therefore, we not necessarily can guarantee every time we can have the perfect performance. Especially in a resource limited environment, the accessibility to lung ultrasound is even more limited because the number of emergency physician and sonographer who is trained to perform lung ultrasound is going to also limited. And I think the third point is much more obvious because I can see this example of a picture that since it's manual, it requires a doctor to sitting right next to the patient to actually touching the patient body, which of course they're having a PPE in a real situation, but still impose the doctor or sonographer into huge risk of transmission. So we need to have some solution to change this situation, where we thought about robotic ultrasound can help. So the goal of our research is to make a lung ultrasound procedure accessible in a resource-limited environment, including African countries. And we want to minimize the risk of transmission between patient and healthcare worker by eliminating physical contact. So the goal of our research is we want to build an effective lung ultrasound platform, which is compared to be low cost and with maximized safety and a quickly development cycle. And I'd like to highlight one prior art about relevant research in a Chinese group made a robotic lung ultrasound procedure actually with their own product. And what we feel that what we want to develop on top of their system is we want to make the system much more cost effective, as well as providing the reachability to scan all the region of the chest where those robotic arm usually doesn't have the reachability to all area of the lung. So our system is adapted based on our clinical collaborator at Nigeria, where we have measured the patient bed in ICU room. And this robot can scan the patient from the top and also from the side and from the back. And the dimension, that's why we adapted the gantry style position system, which is low cost and simple to fabricate. And also we add a passive end effector mechanism, which is actually adapted by the PhD work of Dr. Tsumura at Waseda University, where the positioning system will be passively touching the patient, which will prevent the excessive amount of force that is being applied to the patient, and also allow the contact to be normal direction all the time with respect to the patient. And here is the therapeutic control system. We have a screen, we have a joystick to control, and we have 3 screens to monitor the patient's situation. And here's the actual demonstration of the robotic system. And we're trying to demonstrate that this robot can scan the patient from the top and we can have a therapeutic view and also the ultrasound view to confirm image. And I'm going to jump a bit, and the robot can move to the side. So continuously, very quickly, we can scan the region from the side as well. And we can also scan when patient is facing back to scan all the region required for COVID-19 diagnosis. And we conducted the safety evaluation to make sure the passive system was functioning to not exceeding the safety limit. And we also confirmed that image quality based on the evaluation of the two emergency physicians to evaluate the image quality and confirm that the robotic system provide equivalent image quality compared to the manual scanning procedure. And currently we're transporting the robot in Nigeria, and hopefully we can conduct the system into the actual patient in the National Hospital in Abuja. So finally, to wrap up, we want to present the specific example of medical robotics, and we optimize the design, and we want to make sure the robot is safe enough and also providing enough satisfactory accuracy. And I think I'm running out of time, but I'd like to happy to take any question. I'd like knowledge again about the funding and also collaboration. And please contact me if any questions and suggestions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kai. And we're holding questions until for this block of Leno, you, and myself. So we're holding questions. Thank you. And I'm going to, if you'll exit out, I'll go ahead and start my presentation. And with the so Kai, you need to, there you go. Thank you. So I have the challenging task of kind of wrapping up of these great talks. And for me, COVID, even though I've been doing disaster robotics since 1995, there's just a lot of surprises. So let's look at that. So one thing that I think surprised like me, you kind of listen to the talks and you'd kind of expect, we did get a little hint that there were some other uses, but the uses were primarily maybe 80% really on clinical care, maybe 16, less on public safety, and then some other stuff along the way. Well, we conducted a study with funding from the National Science Foundation, and a big shout out to my colleagues there. And we've got some surprises for you. We went and looked at data both from social media, from the scientific literature, and instead what we found is 45 countries and 326 instances of actual explicit use, operational use, not just, hey, we could use it this way, or we're developing a lab system, things that are actually in a hospital, actually in use. And let's see, I lost that. And the reality is, of those 326 instances that we found, it's spread. It's not just clinical care. It's clinical care, public safety, these other categories. And let's look at those categories in a little more detail. If we look at these 6 work domains, each of which have a different set of funding, a different set of objectives, a different work envelope, we find the big leader was actually public safety, where robots were being used for surveillance of people for social distancing, but also for disinfecting these large public spaces. Clinical care, we've already seen a lot about that. The big ones were disinfecting hospitals and the telepresence that we've already talked about. Surprise here, continuity of work and education. Companies, individuals are buying these for sanitation and for telepresence, for telework. Laboratory and supply chain automation, not a big supplies there, but notice delivery of samples and reagents to keep those laboratories in supply. Isn't that interesting? Quality of life, food delivery to families, but other fun things that people were doing to keep themselves amused. And then we talk about non-hospital care, a lot of work being done to take care of people who are in quarantine camps. Now, for me, looking at the numbers, public safety and clinical care are large, and we would have thought more for laboratory and supply chain automation, but look at continuity of work in education and quality of life. They're almost as large. And these are driven by individual adoption. These aren't things that the government or public health agencies fund or mandate. So this could say this is a turning point, as we saw with Dr. Dario's talk about for adoption, that people, regular people, are beginning to think of using robots and seeing them. Now, if we look in further at whether there were ground, aerial, and there were a couple of marine robots, look how much aerial systems were involved. And they were particularly in public safety. They were using agricultural drones to spray public spaces with disinfectant and also to do surveillance. And also, predominantly, we're seeing the delivery being by air to get from a hospital in one part of a major city to the laboratory in the other part, and to do that very rapidly. So isn't that interesting? Now, is it surprising, given what we've said, that we've been able to identify 29 different use cases that we've broken up by and so you see delivery is a common one, but it has different payloads, different purposes, different constraints. Telepresence the same way. So you can see some of the same terms there. What's really surprising to me is that most of these use cases already had commercially available robots, or robots that had been discussed as being in prototype, ready to go into operation. So the exceptions were things like the mouse swapping robots, and we've certainly seen individual telepresence with all the wonderful research that's been done on robot surgery and other types of medicine. And then we saw some things like other personal activities that were completely surprising, like a person in Cyprus walked his dog with his drone since he was in lockdown. So most of the robots actually existed. And this gets to that question going back, were these robots really new? And we've talked, the previous talks have talked a lot about technical readiness levels in terms of hardware and software maturity, but NASA has a new standard called technical readiness assessment. And they rate not only is the hardware and software mature, but does it fit the existing mission? And does it exist the work processes? So you don't have any problems with unintended problems with the workflow, or there's unintended consequences or failures because you've never tried it in that environment or with that demographic of people and that thing. So a new system is one, it's not necessarily mature, and it's not necessarily mature for its usability. An engineering system, on the other hand, is generally physically mature, but it's had to be adapted for either to fit a new mission or to fit a new work process. And so that means it's kind of yellow in terms of you're not 100% confident in it because you can't use it. And a heritage system is one that's not only there, it's not only mature physically, it's mature for that work process, and it's really being used the same way. So we got there. Now, here's the surprise. Most of the robots already existed. Look at this. Of the 326, 250 were heritage robots. There were certainly a lot of new robots that were developed and a lot of robots that were adapted, those 34 for this. But I think there's the first thing is like, oh yeah, that's just because you use what's available. What we were seeing through the literature, and particularly since this data is through just the end of December, it wasn't necessarily just because of availability. It was because these heritage robots are offer less risk. They pose less risk to the responders, which makes sense. If you're in a hospital, you're dealing with surge, you're dealing with dangerous situations. You don't have time to learn a new system or deal with anything that may go wrong. You need something that actually works. And these use cases were already known. So what does this mean? The real surprise, probably not a real surprise, is that we do have more work to do. And one of the big things is, as Paulo said, how do we better educate roboticists on the existing use cases? The users knew what they'd wanted, they'd already been established in the literature. Why can't we build them more? And then how do we build robots that are more reliable, that are easier to use, easier to adapt, like Paulo said, for that thing that we can't really predict. And as we've seen, some of our data shows, affordability has been a major barrier for some countries using robots more. So I think the challenge for us as roboticists is to look at designing elegant systems. We've done such a wonderful job with the elegance of theoretical properties that I think to make a difference in the future, the things that have worked well for this were systems level. So with that, I want to open this up to the front row discussants for questions, particularly for Lena, Kai, and myself, but also for Paulo. And if you wouldn't mind raising your hand, and meanwhile, everyone else can put questions in Slido. Elia, would you like to give a question?
I was the fastest hand raiser. So, you know, early recognition and early response are the hallmarks of not getting a pandemic. You know, if you recognize something early and quickly respond, you don't have to deal with its long-term consequences because it didn't spread. So in my mind, those are the two key aspects for a technologic or a social behavioral intervention. And so I'm curious how this group feels you can be, and I've heard a bit, but in a more cohesive manner, how you can be really prepared, not for the next pandemic, but to stop the next pandemic, to prevent the next pandemic. And I'll give you one more detail, which is that, you know, I happen to work with Henrik Christensen and some roboticists, but you weren't central or the ones that got called right away. And I think there's a huge role for robotics, but you need to get integrated into the systems of care and the public health systems so that you're ready. And so I'm curious what you think you can do to be more in the middle of this. And also, you know, you were doing a lot of things this time. You've learned something, so you might do more of less next time. And I want to know what your strategy is here to get in the center and become the, you know, the really relevant group.
Right, I think that's a question particularly for Paulo to discuss briefly.
Yes, quickly. I'm very optimistic, you know, actually these tragedies, because we are talking about tragedies, are accelerating the awareness and the acceptance of solutions that could not be accepted before. Consider in Italy, but in Europe, but everywhere actually, we have the acceptance, for example, of remote education. You know, of course, many people don't like, but we are accepting. As I said, the telemedicine is being accepted. And in my opinion, one key point will be accepted. That is the idea of robot companions. You know, when I introduced this concept 10 years ago, many people smiled. Actually, what do you mean? Actually, Robin and the American colleagues said, well, a companion is a husband or wife. You know, it's not a robot. But actually, I think that today most people would like to have a robot companion, you know, but not for just I'll say talking and entertainment, but for real assistance. So what I'm saying is that we are now at a frontier, let's say, which we can play a very important role in introducing robots in different practical ways so that we can prevent. For example, Elia, you may know that superbugs were circulating heavily in hospital. Everybody knew that. So everybody knew, including doctors, that lots of people entered an hospital with some pathology and went out, if they could get out, with a superbug, you know, with an antibiotic-resistant robot. So, for example, so the idea of sanification, okay, having impact on, for example, we were smiling about our Japanese or Korean or Chinese colleagues or people wearing masks. And now I have a mask on my desk, of course, and all of us are doing that. So lots of things are happening in robotics. And I do believe that we should take this opportunity to seriously introduce robots where they should. Just one point. Don't use robots as smartphones could be used. In my opinion, there is really a misunderstanding here. Robots are robots, okay? Robots lift weight. They do not only exchange data or video and so on. For that, smartphones are perfect. So the real challenge is about the physical role of the robots. And there are so many applications in which the challenge for us is this one, making robots act.
Thank you very much. What a good one. Let's go to a different question, perhaps, and a different thing. Marzuka, what do you have for us?
Yeah, thank you. I have a general question. Actually, there are a lot of healthcare robot researches, but the limited number of the robot is commercialized. So for preparing the next pandemic, what's the key issue to translate the healthcare robot from research to commercialized products?
Lino, do you want to look at answering your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure if I agree with that that statement. You know, for instance, there's a Danish company, UVD, which were selling as many robots as they could produce for disinfection worldwide. So there are, in fact, there are a lot of companies selling a lot of robots to address these pandemics.
And I'm going to add in on that. Our work has shown that there were at least 70 robots. Most of those 29 use cases, you had commercially available robots and more than one to choose from. So it was there. Now, whether the issue was, why did we have so many robots and nobody was using them? Well, you know, part of that can be the regulatory environment, but the insurance environment for healthcare, things like that. And now we have people that are more familiar with them, which I think that's why I think we're going to see a breakthrough in the home market. They've now become institutionalized. But we did have robots there, and we did know the use cases. And whether or not our research was actually focusing on the use cases of value, that's another question for us as a community. Do we really focus on work domains? So thank you. Filippo, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. My question was more or less related to this topic about the easy to adopt robots and the speed to adopt robots. It's true that there is a case of the UVD company from Denmark, but I think that Robin identified one issue. We have several solutions or potential solutions that actually are not all available immediately as the UVD robot or some few others. So my question would have been about what to do to increase and improve the capability of the community to speed up the early and fast adoption, and how to train the community to go more directly to certification, for example, training for the adopters, and any issue that could really bring the robot as soon as they are requested, when, for example, a pandemic situation occurs. So what can we do now to solve this if a new pandemic solution will occur in 1 month, for example, or in 6 months?
You know,
if you have any other issue that we can discuss on that.
Right. I would like to hear a discussion between Paolo, who, you know, representing the Italians, did such a great job, but at the same time, what insights Lino has from the paper that was looking at a different European Union project that was actually soliciting grants. So it looked like one was very bottom up and one was very, very top down. So I would like to hear a discussion. So Lino, do you want to go first and talk about what you think the lessons learned from what you saw?
Well, I think somehow Filippo. Sorry, I'm.
Yes, it's me.
He has a point. There's still a gap in between the level, the usability of the technology and the community who will use this technology. So I would say that if you think, for instance, on robotic vacuum cleaners, they are very easy to use and they are deploying worldwide without problems. I'm not sure if commercial robots addressing some of the relevant applications for these pandemics are at that level of usability. And in that sense, I believe you have a point. So there are still some work to be done in terms of making the existing robots easy to use by common people. Yes, that common people, or at least non-roboticists, because you would like to deploy a robot and not needing an engineer to work with that robot. There's no much gain in that. But I mean, the problem or the challenge is identified, and I believe the community is working towards making commercial robots as much usable as possible. So I believe that's one of the areas where a lot of work will happen in the next few years.
Paulo, what do you think?
Yeah, I fully realize Filippo's point, and I agree, because I've seen so many smart applications not being widely accepted. However, there are what I could call waves of development and acceptability. So in my opinion, like in the case of the Roomba robot, we are, most relevant, but in fact, these two cases are really relevant, is the Da Vinci robot. The Da Vinci robot I've seen with, of course, I was one of the researchers in the area, and I've seen the difficulty at the beginning and then the full acceptability. So the point is that today we have a real case in which many people realize that having a physical interface, okay, between themselves and the physical world, the real world, could be really usable. So for example, Kai's application is very relevant, because, as I also anticipated, many doctors and many nurses and many paramedics, they really need to interface, and they will need, because in the future they will not know which kind of pathologies people may have. In the past, this was not particularly, I would say, considered, but now we have learned. And so this idea of creating an interface. So what better than a robot, and not a smartphone, not better than a robot could help to do that. And just to conclude, I believe that we are now in a very good situation in which we have some key technology. First of all, as I say, intelligence within the robots. That is the incredible explosion of MEMS. Okay? Years ago, people were always complaining that sensors were expensive, energy consuming, not reliable. So now we have extraordinary sensors, virtually free, okay, that we can put everywhere. So the second point is the intelligence in the body. There are a lot of solutions. For example, the explosion of collaborative robots. They were not available just 10 years ago. Today, we can use robots and dare to contact people physically. This is almost, I would say, done. And the third is intelligence outside the robots, because the whole idea that we have to have a very intelligent robots and so on, of course, is still valid, but the robot can be connected to the web, can get a lot of information, no need for navigation, because there is Google Maps, and the robot can use Google. I'm exaggerating, you know, but I'm just saying that those are key technologies that can help to jump towards real applications. And I think we should be able, and the initiative we are discussing are in the right direction. One final point, Filippo pointed out, system compatibility and acceptability. You know what is the main problem? Because I know what Filippo is doing and Antonio are doing. When we developed and deliver a robot to a hospital, then the point is, who will take care of that robot in the hospital? But one could say that for the Da Vinci was the same. 10 years ago, there were engineers in the operating room. So the Da Vinci company had to deliver engineers in the operating room. Today, this is no longer the case. Many people have learned and trained so they can train and use robots. So those are my points.
Yeah, there's so many aspects to this. Before we go to questions from the general audience, I would like to get Roland's perspective. I mean, ETH has been so wonderful in developing both technology and commercializing it. What are you seeing? What are you hearing that you think is important for the robotics community?
Thanks very much. Yes, thanks very much for this very interesting presentation. I think it's really great to see that on one side, the robotics community is actually trying to help in this very difficult situation. And on the other side, I think we see also from the public at large that they hope that robots will help us in the future. And there is, I'm pretty sure, another boost of robotics applications due to this situation. I liked very much your final element, Robin, you had on the slide, so that we should probably also have systems which really are mainly focusing on the final application and not only on the very nice theoretical work. Now, of course, the question is always how can we find this link between the two elements, which is not so easy for universities. And I was actually wondering, this is a question to probably all of the panelists, what can we learn for long term? Because we now react on something which appeared all of a sudden. We're probably all surprised, but I'm pretty sure there will be another pandemic. There will be some similar elements. There will be another Fukushima disaster or something similar. We don't hope, but I think there is a good chance that there will be. How can we actually plan that we are more ready at this moment, especially because we had these ideas always in mind. So it was defining some of our research agenda, but then when it happens, we are not ready. Is there some way we can learn how to better approach this? Of course, you gave probably part of the answer, Robin, that we should be closer to the application and realize what we can only do with robots and not what we cannot do with robots.
Well, Roland, I'm going to jump in here, but you're right. What can we do for the next pandemic? But you did say something that sort of caused me a little distress, and that's this idea. Oh, look, we were surprised. No. 2014, 2016, we had Ebola. We had lots of work in robotics for infectious diseases going on there. And in fact, one of the robots that came out were the UVC disinfecting robots. They were unfortunately not useful for Ebola because they are built for hospitals. But they were originally like, oh, we can disinfect, we can do this. It won't fit a rural hospital with dirt floors in Africa, but we'll do hospitals. And then Ebola went away. But because they were low cost, well built, and easy to use, hospitals adopted them to prevent hospital-acquired infections. So that's why we had Xenix in the United States and UVD in Denmark already commercially available, already supplying hospitals with these, and now hospitals could use them more frequently or buy more in other groups. And then we got into availability, they couldn't make them fast enough. So going back to Ebola, what we had heard from working with the doctors from the workshop was, quit trying to duplicate what a person can do. People, what can we delegate? Give us transportation, give us delivery, give us things that you could train a dog to do. Let us have the quality time with the patient. Let us be with them when we need to, but not when we don't have to be. Go make us IV bags that self-refill, that we don't have to don up and spend our exposure time doing that instead of feeding a patient. And I think one of the lessons from Italy was, we don't want to feed the patient. That's when we don't want the robot to give them the food, because that's the only time some of these elderly get to see anybody in their entire day. And so that human use of humans. So I think that's one of the things that we need to think about, getting back to your point, Roland, is how do we keep being surprised, and yet it's not surprising about disasters. All right. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to say before we open up and along those topics?
I fully agree that if we look at the community's response to these pandemics, it's not exactly a surprise. It was a huge response. Of course, we can argue about the impact. Okay, maybe there is not yet a huge impact, but anyway, the magnitude of the response was very impressive. As even the numbers of Robin in her survey, it's really impressive. The number of works worldwide, which immediately, somehow in a very short time, made something available. So I would say that if we look back, clearly we are improving. So the next pandemics probably will be much more prepared, hopefully.
Well,
yeah, if I'm allowed to, just a little bit from medical robotics perspective, and this situation really opened up the new technological challenges that engineering scientists, we can really tackle this situation. For example, like since before this pandemic, I'm working on medical robotics. I'm talking to clinician and sonographer. They say they're okay with their manual scan. They don't need robot, right? But now they give us the total different reaction. They realize oh, we cannot do manual. We don't want to, get too close to the patient and what we can do. So this really opened up the new question, and a lot of questions really have a capability to tackle. So it's definitely, a disaster for human being, but it's a good challenge and allow us to be improved and go to the next paradigm.
Great. I've got to, looking at what the audience is saying, there's a whole series of questions related. I'm going to paraphrase them as telepresence. What's the role of telepresence? And in particular, is telepresence really needed, or is that a degenerative case? What are the things that need to be automated? So what are we seeing there? Paulo, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I believe that this is going to be a very, very interesting technology, because it answers the question that Kai and many of us pointed out, that is the need for assisting people in a remote manner. So I think that telepresence, there was also a question about teleoperation, I think. Of course, all techniques that allow people to work remotely for what we are in fact forced to do have a very, very nice future, in my opinion. So I'm very positive about that. I just wanted to to answer Roland and Robin about what to expect. I mentioned the black swan or white swan or gray swan. Actually, this is something that we expected. The case of Ebola, Robin pointed out, for people like me, and most of you used to travel, any kind of news about a strange infection resonated very much. So I was one that was looking at it, but not many people did. It's the syndrome of the cicada and the ant. Many people of the story for children, many people live like cicadas. They sing in the summer. And other people are like ants. And probably we are ants and we were preparing for winter and developing technologies and solutions that then could help. don't affect that many people live every day looking at the next pandemic, but we should do that. And I think, Robin, actually, my point is the value. I was proposing this many years ago, and you have led this idea of an international rescue community, robotics, of course, ready to go. Wherever it comes, the need comes, and in any circumstances, using robots. I think this is something that we should definitely continue to do, and really are indebted to you, Robin, for the effort you have done in coordinating this, and very, very, very helpful, very important. We should strengthen this kind of initiative.
Well, thank you for that. And let's hope that's one of the outcomes of this, is to get that stronger community together and to work. We do have a couple of questions that are aimed specifically at Kai's work. And let me try to paraphrase those and summarize them so you can briefly tell you in the few minutes that we've got left. Your system looks very still experimental and prototypical, of course, but you had said that the advantage of doing the ultrasounds was to do the portability and ease of sterilization. And your prototype didn't really show how you could keep it clean, didn't show it portability, although the gantry robot was there, and also the training. Could you speak to the operationalizing of this technology, what you're looking, the challenges there?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and we have been thinking seriously about the logistics about this development. And apparently, the first phase, we need to prove the concept. We need to show doctor that this is useful and convince them to keep working on this project with us. And that's where we came up this design, which to maximize the functionality and as well as safety to the patient. And but still, we see the advantage in terms of our system compared to CT or other system is. It's movable, and also it's easy. It's very simple to assemble so that we can install to anywhere in the hospital, including emergency division, where CT, require a huge room to be dedicated sitting there all the time. And the piece can be deassembled to be sterilized independently. That will also allow us to have a module component to take advantage of our system. And in a short term, training is going to be an iterative process. As we do right now, for example, we have Ryosuke collected the data from the subject, and we communicate with a clinician, and they provide a request like what angle should be, tweeted, and what appearance should be, and those like communication. We do kind of like a telehealth communication in this manner. In the future, I think this is where the room of intelligence or deep learning will come in, because that's another research we're doing, how we can automate this process. For example, using deep learning to automatically identify the region of the chest, to automatically assign the robot to move those regions. I think that should come in the future. So in the short term, we still, just like how Da Vinci system works, teleoperation, we need to have established the protocol. And long term, I think we can definitely improve the technology to working toward more intelligent robotic system.
Yeah, that's always an interesting dichotomy. Antonio, did you have any comments or thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, one point related to the telepresence that I think is relevant is that it was mentioned also in Kai's slide, is the 5G. 5G could be a very interesting enabling technology for telepresence. We were missing now the capability, for instance, for having haptics, the capability of an infrastructure to do that. And the second enabling technology is the one Paolo was mentioning, that is collaborative robotics. So we have much safer robots now that can really interact with humans, like in the hospital context. So we feel safe when we have a robot in a human context shared with humans. So I think these two technologies could be very important for facing future challenges, because we need to be able to adapt quickly to new challenges. So we need to have already all these bricks built in. That was my comment.
What great points, and really emphasizing both the technology, but how we're working towards social and physical HRI, ways of things that we've not thought about. Well, we're out of time, but I want to wrap up by asking Paulo Dario, as one of the pioneers in biorobotics of this whole medical field, what's the one thing you want the community to walk away from this year of robots and COVID?
You mean to walk away, so to avoid?
Or walk into, or get more involved. But what's the one thing you want them to remember from this, from our discussion?
Really, in my opinion, the importance of managing contact, physical contact. That is the essence of robotics. So this is the challenge, and this is really the chance we have to make a step ahead on the ability of developing a robot that can reliably touch for different applications, assisting surgery, whatever, humans.
I think that's it, right? The ability for robots to reliably touch humans and for roboticists to reliably touch the users so that the users can make the world a better place. Thank you all very much for your comments and participation. Sorry that we cannot get to all the questions, but let's virtually thank our panelists as well as our host, the IFRR, for sponsoring this, and our front row discussants were just wonderful. Thank you all, and that concludes our panel.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you
So much.
So
Thank you.
much.